So, you have a round face, but the tips you find online about round faces are pretty contradictory, aren't they? Some say to wear a middle part because it lengthens your face. Others say don't wear it because it kills hair volume. Some people will tell you to keep your hair long. Others say that short hair looks great for round faces. So which one of these tips should you actually be following then? Well, in this video, we're going to talk about why not all round faces are considered the same and what you want to look out for to find the styles that actually work for your round face in particular. So this idea actually came from one of your comments. I recently started a short series on facial proportions, and they're essentially just shorter versions of the topics from my long form videos for me to share some small tips with you about why certain styles might not be working for you and what you can do about it. And one of the comments asked me to create similar content for round faces. So I started brainstorming for some universal tips that I can share about round faces. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this topic actually needs to be covered in a long form video because it's a little more complicated and there is no such thing as one universal tip for round faces. So with that said, I think we should first define what does it mean to have a round face. And you'll find a lot of information online about how wide the hairline should be against the cheekbones or what the shape of your chin should look like, etc. But simply put, there's two common factors for round faces. First, the face is short based on the width to length ratio. And second, the cheeks are pretty full. So the overall facial structure is quite soft, and that sort of explains the name round. So essentially, if you have a round face, then it means you have a short face and you have some fullness in your cheeks. Now, the first reason why I said that not all round faces are the same is because of the proportions within our faces. And let me explain that with some visual examples. Here's two faces that I think we can all agree are considered round. They both have short faces and some fullness in their cheeks. And in these photos, they're both wearing a similar hairstyle with a middle part and the hair tucked behind the ears. Now, if you remember from my previous video on different part styles, I mentioned that a middle part is generally recommended for short faces because it draws a straight line down the middle of the face where the face is the longest. So theoretically, a middle part should work for both faces, but hypothetically, if both of these ladies were my clients, I would recommend this style of hair only for Selena Gomez and not for Chrissy Teigen. And there's two reasons for this, with the first being the height of the forehead. Chrissy has a high forehead or a long upper third compared to her middle and lower thirds. And this particular hairstyle pins the hair back behind both ears, and that makes the proportional difference within the face very, very obvious. So a middle part might help with lengthening the overall facial length, but it also ends up highlighting the forehead more. So for Chrissy's proportions, I would prioritize styles that can make the forehead appear less highlighted and more proportionate against the rest of the face, even if that means the face is not going to appear as lengthened as it does with a middle part. So whether it's with a middle part or a side part, styles that help with drawing more attention to the eyes than to the forehead is going to be a higher priority for her. So if you have a round face and you want to add more length to the face, then a middle part can do that. But what's more important to consider is the proportions within the face and how the hair is actually styled. So then why does this style work for Selena Gomez? Not only does Selena have a lower forehead, but she also has a high cranial top. And if you have a high cranial top, then styles that add more root volume to the crown of the head is going to break the proportional balance between the length of the face and the length of the head. So for Selena's proportions, I would prioritize styles that can press down that crown volume as much as possible. And since she already has a short face, a straight middle part is going to be great at both pressing down that crown volume and adding length to the face. And this is exactly why I said that we can't really narrow it down to one generic tip for all round faces, because all faces are different, which means which area to prioritize is also going to be different. I'm going to show you another example, and this time I'll use Selena Gomez and Michelle Williams. And again, I think we can all agree that both of these faces are typically considered round. Now, between these two faces, why I would be more inclined to suggest a pixie cut to Michelle than to Selena is, again, because of the proportions within the face, and specifically because of the length of the Filtrum. So one way our eyes recognize how long or short the face appears is by looking at the distance between the eyes and the lips. So having a longer filtrum naturally increases that distance, and that also means that there's more tendency for the eyes to be drawn downwards. Now, a pixie cut is a style that removes the hair around the lower face, so that naturally draws the attention up towards the hair, which means it has an offsetting effect against the long filtrum. And this might make you wonder if having a long filtrum is bad, but it really isn't. It just creates a different sort of look. Because a long filtrum draws more attention down and it lengthens the face, it ends up adding a calmer and more serene impression to the face. So for someone like Michelle's proportions, a change in the hair length is going to have a bigger impact on changing the overall vibe of the face. A longer hairstyle is going to accentuate the filtrum more, and it makes her look a bit more feminine, calm, and mature. Whereas a shorter hairstyle offsets the length of the filtrum and it highlights the short facial length and full cheeks more, so it ends up making her look a bit more vibrant and upbeat. So the answer to which style should I be choosing is really up to what kind of an image or vibe do you want to create with your look. So then why not this same hairstyle for Selena Gomez? Well, if we look at Selena's facial proportions, she actually has a short filtrum, so her face has a tendency to look even shorter than it already does. And like I said, a pixie cut draws more attention upwards, and that ends up highlighting the short length of the face even further, which I think is really unnecessary for Selena's proportions. And on top of that, a shorter hair length also just naturally adds more height to the crown, which again, like I said in the previous section, is not really ideal for Selena's proportions. So for Selena, the overall vibe or the impression of the face isn't gonna change as drastically with different hair lengths. I mean, her face is gonna look short regardless. So in this scenario, I would recommend styles that can bring more proportional balance to the face, and I'd place a higher priority on that. While we're on the topic of the overall impression of the face, another reason why I said that not all round faces should be considered the same is because of the facial features and how they contribute to creating an overall vibe of a person. For example, if we look at these two blurred faces, I think both can be considered round. The left side looks a little bit longer because there's more hairline volume and we can see more of the forehead, but both of these faces have a similar width to length ratio, and the outline of their face shape is pretty round and soft. But these faces actually create very different overall impression when we look at the faces with the facial features. One side looks much more mature and the other side looks cuter. And I think these two actually have a pretty big age gap in real life. And as we can see from their profile view, we can see some differences in the angularity of the jawline and the fullness of the cheeks as well. But more importantly, it's the facial features that really create very different vibes. On one side, we can see much more straight lines in the nose, the eyebrows, the eye shape, and the lip shape. And the other side has much rounder curves in the features, and the features appear softer as well. They also have very different body types and styles. One is taller and much more angular in their body, and her style is also edgier and sexier, whereas the other side looks smaller and far more delicate and cute. So obviously, similar hairstyles are going to create very different vibes for these two. There are, of course, slight differences in the hairstyles themselves, but the difference in the overall vibe is truly night and day. One is not better than the other, they're just different and incomparable. The point I'm trying to drive with these examples is that getting fixated on one single aspect like the roundness of your face is not always beneficial in defining our own style. The same style on two different faces can still create very different images. So we should just take these tips as a reference for us to experiment with and see how we can utilize them in defining our own preferences. And I think in that process of exploring is when we'll find our own unique vibe that's really incomparable to anyone else. So don't get too fixated on your insecurities or finding all of the generic tips that supposedly work for everyone but only really work for a few, because that might actually be hurting your sense of uniqueness when it comes to your style. And I say this because, yes, I do talk a lot about finding balance and harmony on this channel, but I should make it clear that the end goal is not to look like everyone else, but it's to find your own comfort zone in balancing out what works for your inherent impression that your face naturally carries versus the image or the vibe that you want to create through your style. I hope you found the tips helpful, and I'll see you in my next video. Until then, stay unique and stay gorgeous.